Which NFL quarterbacks are in the best situations to succeed? What's going on, football fans? It's Mitch, back with another NFL reaction video, and we're reacting to another list, a top 10 list of the best quarterback situations in the NFL. This list is courtesy of our boy, Sam Monson, over at PFF. And this list happens to be for the 33rd team. And I believe we've reacted to the 33rd team here before. And we have mentioned how we may not have liked one of their lists in the past. So this one's going to be fun. The best quarterback supporting cast, the best quarterback situations in the NFL. Just going into the list, I assume, because I only see the graphic come across the timeline, so I don't exactly 100% sure know, but I'm thinking this means, okay, receiving core, offensive line, play caller, perhaps the defense. I'm thinking this means, first and foremost, the offensive support talent around the quarterback, and then possibly the defense, the coaching around that quarterback, and basically everything that is supporting the quarterback, the situation around the quarterback to help them succeed, throw for a lot of yards, touchdowns, and win a lot of football games. That's what I'm assuming. So let's react to Sam Monson's top 10 quarterback situations. Before we get started, Gronk spike the like button. If we get 100 likes on this reaction, I will give you my 1 to 32, 32 to 1, worst to first quarterback situation rankings in the NFL. Maybe I'll even do tiers. So let's get 100 likes on this video, and I will provide my personal situation rankings and put my money where my big mouth is. Let's begin with the number one situation in the NFL, according to Mr. Sam Monson. That is the San Francisco 49ers, Brock Purdy. Okay. I think I would have to agree with that. I believe that the 49ers have the best season-to-season play caller in the NFL in Kyle Shanahan, one of the geniuses of the offensive side of the football. There's only a handful in the league right now, and he's certainly at the forefront. The offensive line, I would say, is perhaps the weakness of his cast around him, but he does have an elite left tackle, and they do have an excellent running game to take pressure off of Purdy and put him in good down and distance. His play calling provides a lot of open receivers to throw to and not a lot of contested targets or contested tight window throws, which is ideal for a quarterback. And obviously, the situation in terms of the system that he's in uses Purdy's accuracy, timing, rhythm, and then also even his movement skills to his advantage. So he's put in a good situation for his skill set to succeed. They have Deebo Samuel, a yak monster, Christian McCaffrey, probably by far the best running back in football, Brandon Ayuk, a perimeter option, George Kittle, a tight end, middle of the field option. Now they have a first-round receiver added to the mix, Ricky Pearsall, one of the most clutch secondary targets in football, Jawan Jennings, and the list goes on. They also have a very solid defense. I don't think it's top 3-ish, but I do believe it's top 10 and should be even perhaps better than last year, this year. So yeah, even if you include defense, I would say that the 49ers with Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, Charvarius Ward, Javon Hargrave, Leonard Floyd now, Dre Greenlaw coming back from injury, Hufanga coming back from injury. They have a good defense. So yeah, I just can't say that the Niners are not number one here. At number 2 is the Detroit Lions. This one is interesting. So I think this is where it becomes a debate after number 1. The Lions are certainly in that conversation. So I think the thing that the Lions have is the offensive line. They have the protection. They've got probably the best offensive line on paper entering 2024. Swapping out Jonah Jackson for Kevin Zeitler, but everything else has stayed the same. Frank Ragnow, elite center, right guard position. You've got Graham Glasgow, who's pretty darn solid. You've got 2 elite tackles in Sewell and then also Decker. You've got a really, really good, talented young tight end in Sam Laporta just entering his prime. You've got Jahmyr Gibbs, a receiving option that can create explosives. You've got David Montgomery to run the football on short yardage and red zone opportunities. You've got Amon-Ra St. Brown, an easy available slot receiver. You've got some speed with Jameson Williams. I would say that the Lions are maybe missing a number 2 receiver for the perimeter if Jameson Williams does not show out. And then maybe even then, they're maybe missing a number 3. Like, is Khalif Raymond the number 3? Donovan Peoples-Jones the number 3? So their number 2, number 3 situation at receiver is pretty lacking. But the offense overall, besides that, is pretty awesome and very ideal. Jared Goff is a pocket passer. He operates really well from play action. Ben Johnson's one of the best run game designers in football, ties that together with play action, understands Jared Goff very well, how to attack the middle of the field, where Jared Goff throws the ball the best. And the protection is superb in the middle of the pocket, as well as the tackles, where Goff is rarely ever feeling any pressure. And he's got all these different types of plays, screens, play action stuff, drop back stuff. Ben Johnson's really good in pretty much all aspects as a play caller. So I would say that the Lions offensively are one of the more ideal situations. But then if you throw in the defense, I kind of feel like it's less ideal. I don't think the Lions defense is terrible by any means. I don't think it's elite, though. I certainly think it's somewhere between mid and good, somewhere in that range. But I would not put it in the conversation of the best defenses in the NFL. And it does appear here on this list that defense hasn't really been brought too much into the conversation, just looking at the list here. So I'm going to say that that's probably the last priority. But I would say that defense for the Lions, it's definitely better this offseason, adding Carlton Davis, Terrion Arnold, improving the secondary especially, then getting DJ Reader and so on. So it's definitely better, but I definitely still don't think it's great. So the Lions, they're definitely in that conversation for number 2, but we're going to continue to debate this. So the Eagles at number 3, I think if I was a quarterback, I'd rather be in the Eagles offense in terms of, I think the talent around me is better. I'd rather have A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, and Saquon than what the Lions have, especially considering the Eagles have probably the second best offensive line in the NFL, just assuming that they went from number 1 to number 2 based on Jason Kelce retiring. But otherwise, they have an excellent O-line, right? Like the best tackle duo in the NFL with Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata. They've got 2 good guards, Dickerson. They've got, Juergens now kind of going where he's supposed to be in terms of like elevating and getting into the role that he's supposed to be in. So I kind of feel like the Eagles are always good on the O-line, and even if they miss Jason Kelce, they should still be very solid. Now you've got a really good runner to rely on as well in the backfield. I think the main difference here for Monson is probably the play calling from Kellen Moore to Ben Johnson. I definitely think Ben Johnson is superior, but I also feel like Kellen Moore is not a bad coordinator. But I feel like the difference between having a very good coordinator or a special coordinator in the case of Kyle Shanahan or a Ben Johnson in comparison to just like he's good, he's above average, he's maybe average, Kellen Moore, is a pretty big difference, and it might be the biggest difference you could have. So yeah, like, I get it. Now, the defense thing, I think both defenses are in similar shape. I think the Eagles have more talent. Fangio's now coaching that defense, but I think there's more questions about the Eagles' defense. So that's definitely debatable. I could see, I'm not really going to hate there. At number 4, the Texans. Now, I think the Texans have better receiving talent and better skill positions than pretty much anybody on this list, maybe besides the 49ers. But the offensive line is kind of closer to the Niners than it is the Eagles or the Lions. Like, it's okay. Like, they've got kind of a similar build to the Niners in terms of they have an elite left tackle, and then everyone else on the line is kind of like okay. Like, Shaq Mason, I would say, is still a good player, but there are questions about the left guard position, the center position, and even right tackle for the Texans. So the offensive line is the most suspect. So if I was CJ Stroud, that'd be what I'd be worried about, is the pressure getting to me. But understanding if I'm CJ Stroud, I've got the maneuverability. I'm smart. I can get rid of the ball. I can manage that pocket pretty well. But I've got Tank Dell. I've got Nico Collins. I've got Stephon Diggs. That's the best receiver trio in football probably, right? Then you've got Dalton Schultz at tight end, who's very reliable. You've got Joe Mixon now at running back, who you can always hand it off to. He's very reliable to get a big play in a big moment. So you've got an electric slot receiver, a guy that can stretch the field in Tank Dell no matter where he aligns. You've got Stephon Diggs, a wicked intermediate man beater, route runner. And then you've got Nico Collins, just a blend of size, speed, and skill. So it's hard to beat that. And then you look at the Texans defense led by DeMeco Ryans, that I think is fierce up front. I think they've got fast linebackers, a wicked pass rush, Danielle Hunter, Will Anderson, Denico Autry. They've got two linebackers I really like in Harris and Al-Shaair. Secondary is young but really growing with guys like Jalen Petrie and Derek Stingley. They have very few flaws on that side of the ball. So if I'm going with defense, out of the 4 teams in the top, I'd actually argue the Texans maybe have the best defense out of all the top 4 teams. I think the Niners are right there with the Texans, but I would actually maybe lean towards Houston just due to the DeMeco Ryans effect. I'd also say that the offensive coordinating of the Texans in Solak, I believe it's Solak, right? If I'm not mistaken. He's a good coordinator too. So he's not great though. I think he's maybe a little bit overrated. He was a great keep for them. Slowick, sorry. I'm getting it confused maybe with the Ringer podcaster because I think their first names are the same. Bobby Slowick and Ben Solak. Shout out to Ben Solak. But Bobby Slowick is the offensive coordinator. I knew I forgot what his name was. But young guy, still kind of learning the ropes. I think he did some really good things, especially in terms of the play action, the formation usage, in terms of the splits, and having a lot of their receivers line up, close to the numbers, condensed formations, tight formations, getting them away from press coverage, stressing the field horizontally through those alignments. I think he does a very good job in that regard, but I do feel like the run game was a little bit lacking. An over-reliance on running the football on early downs, despite it not really working, was a little bit annoying. But there are things about the Texans play calling that I do like a lot. So I would say that the Texans, if you include the whole thing, I think their defense, man, that's a personal preference question. I kind of feel like you could rank the Texans anywhere from number 2 to number 4. I definitely don't think they're any lower than number 4. So I will say that. I could see somebody maybe even liking them at number 1. I'd personally rather have Kyle Shanahan though, if it was me. But I think if you put them at number 2, I wouldn't hate it. If you put them at number 3, I certainly wouldn't hate it if you included the whole thing. The offensive line is a little less, but the skill talent is dramatic, and the defense is good, and they've got everything. So to me, the Texans are certainly in the elite category. There's no question. And so far, that top 4 is a really solid list. You can't really hate on it too much. But then you get to number 5, and you say, the Atlanta Falcons are the 5th best quarterback situation in the NFL. I don't know if I can agree with that. I just can't. Atlanta has a good offensive line, but I think some of it was Arthur Smith and his scheme and his reliance on the run game, which set up them in good situations to pass protect. I think that they are somewhat overrated in the pass protection category in drop back passing situations. I do think that Zach Robinson, while kind of alluring and interesting, is young and unproven as an offensive play caller. I like the scheme that he comes from, Sean McVay, that lineage, all that stuff. But I have questions. I think that the receiving core is average. Drake London is a really good player. Besides that, Darnell Mooney, he's been hit and miss throughout his career. He's got a lot of speed. He can stress vertical. Kyle Pitts has been a complete ghost for half of his career. And otherwise, Rondell Moore, the receiving core doesn't get me super excited. So the O-line I think is good. Definitely in the top 5 or 6 conversation, but I definitely also feel it could be overrated in drop back situations, which as a quarterback, I'm pretty concerned about, especially if I'm a pocket quarterback and I'm Kirk Cousins and I've got an Achilles injury. Bijan is an excellent running back. Tyler Algier is a very good backup. So I like my situation on the ground, and I do believe that I can run the football, which means that I'm not too, worried about really having to carry the offense. Defensively, they stink. So I honestly can't really get behind the defensive conversation. The defense sucks in a lot of different ways. They can't rush the quarterback. The corner position is not deep at all. They've got one really good safety, one really good corner, pretty much no one that is elite in the front 7. So yeah, the defense included is definitely not allowing me to put the Falcons there. But just offensive-wise, I think I look at a couple teams here that I would prefer. First of all, I think I look at Cleveland and I say, okay, Cleveland has an excellent O-line that I would argue is probably better than Atlanta's. Like, toe-to-toe, man-for-man, depth for depth. Cleveland's O-line's probably the 3rd best in the NFL. Like, they've got an excellent running game. I know I can still run the ball with Nicholas Chubb. I've got a number 1 receiver who can run routes and separate, unlike Drake London a little bit, where Drake London's more of a jump up and get the football type guy. Amari Cooper can separate. He runs great routes, so I know he's going to be open. I can just give him the ball in space, right? Njoku is a yak monster where I don't really have to deal with, okay, where are we putting him? There's less of a versatility in terms of, what could Kyle Pitts be? Is he on the outside? Is he in the inside? Is he slot? What is he? But at the same time, a lot of teams and a lot of coordinators don't really know how to use him. Well, Njoku is an excellent blocker. He's great after the catch. We can get him involved early in the game, in the screen game. He's excellent in that regard, and he is a monster over the middle. So, Njoku is a big-time player. Then I've got Jerry Jeudy, who's also a guy that can run great routes out of the slot. I've got Elijah Moore, who's a bit underrated. I've got Cedric Tillman, guys off the bench that aren't bad. So to me, I look at that whole offensive situation. I say it doesn't get much more ideal. I'd prefer to have another receiver like another Amari Cooper on top of having Amari Cooper already. That would be amazing. That would be like Houston type situation, but I already have an elite O-line, so I can't have everything. Then I look at the defense and I say that's the best defense in the NFL from last year. And Mina Kimes ranked at number 1 on her list this year, which maybe I'll have to react to one of her lists. But in terms of the Browns, I think they're definitely more, interesting and ideal than the Falcons if I'm thinking through the quarterback lens. And then even when I'm comparing coordinators and play callers, I've got Stefanski, a proven baller, I think 2-time coach of the year, if I'm not mistaken. Are we going to put respect behind that yet? I don't know. And he's been able to manage a lot of different quarterback personalities and players, right? Baker Mayfield. He's won with him. He's won with Joe Flacco. He's been having to deal with Deshaun Watson. So if I'm Deshaun Watson, as long as I've got my head out of my rear end and I'm staying in between the lines here, I probably like playing for the Browns more than I would like playing for the Falcons. I also know that I don't have to score 27, 30 points every game to win the game. So that's a big deal. The Chicago Bears are at number 6, who I kind of skipped over for a second. I understand why, but I also say I look at those receivers and that's very, very interesting. I definitely could see why I think the Bears are probably more ideal than the Falcons too. I think the difference between the Falcons and the Bears, because the Bears got a better defense, based on last year. So even if you include that, play calling wise, I think, they're fairly similar. Like Waldron, Robinson, they're both Rams guys at the end of the day. They both run the same offense, maybe slight differences in what they like to do. I think maybe Robinson has more potential, but honestly, we don't really know. Then you look at the receiving core and it's night and day. Chicago's is 10 times better than the Falcons receiving core. It's not even a question in my mind. You've got Rome Odunze, a top 10 pick in the NFL draft who everybody loves, and some were comparing to Larry Fitzgerald. So you've got him. You've got Keenan Allen, who is one of the best chain movers, one of the most quarterback-friendly wide receivers in the NFL over the past decade. And then you've got DJ Moore, who I can put anywhere in my formation, in my alignment. He's the Z, he's the X, he's the slot. I can put him in the backfield. So I got DJ Moore. He can fly by you. He can get yards after catch. Tight end Cole Kmet's a great red zone threat. Good over the middle of the field. Soft hands. Not a great yak threat, but overall pretty solid player. He can block too. The O-line, it's not bad. You know, what will Darnell Wright be in year 2? That's a first-round pick talent that I have to my right, to my left. Braxton Jones has been a good story. The interior is solid. The center is a bit suspect. So if I'm a young quarterback, I would like a more ideal center position where I've got a veteran who can kind of help me with protections and things of that nature. But at the same time, I don't think there's, anything about the Falcons that would make it more ideal than the Bears, other than the offensive line. That's really the only thing. Other than that, sure, they got a better running back. Maybe a better running game, I guess. But the Bears won't have a bad running game, will they? I mean, they've got a couple different running backs they can utilize. DeAndre Swift is a good receiver. I can throw him the football. So there's a lot of different ways to look at it here, but I don't know. I think I'd have the Bears and the Browns ahead of the Falcons. The Chiefs, I don't understand why the Chiefs aren't a little bit higher here. Now, their receiving core is a little bit suspect, I guess, because Rashee Rice has the whole kind of offseason to deal with, the offseason situation. But he's a good young receiver who can create after the catch for sure. He's excellent at that. And he even has some speed to get down the field. Xavier Worthy's probably the fastest player in the NFL, and I believe he's going to be a good player in the NFL. Stop on a dime quickness. Might take some time, but he's really promising. I think that Marquise Brown's a proven 1,000-yard receiver in the NFL, who at least I know he can get down the field with speed. You can put him in the slot. You can put him outside. He can run, and be that guy that catches like 7 passes a game, or he can be a guy that stresses the defense down the field and he can catch 3 passes a game. But either way, he's going to be effective. The O-line is always excellent in Kansas City. Like, the tackle situation is really suspect in my opinion in terms of Jawan Taylor is just like an inconsistent overall player, but he's a better pass protector than he is a run blocker. Left tackle, they've got a lot of questions there, I guess, but like if you're Mahomes especially, I don't think you really mind because you have Joe Thuney, who's a future Hall of Famer. You've got Creed Humphrey, who might be a future Hall of Famer, and you've got Trey Smith, who's like an excellent player who's probably going to get a lot of money soon. So yeah, you've got like the best interior trio in the NFL protecting you, so you're not worried about anyone in your face. You're always just moving and manipulating the pocket around and trying to get around and like get outside the pocket and things like that if the tackles get beat. Running backs, Isaiah Pacheco, the run game's always well coordinated, and at the end of the day, you've got Andy Reid, who's an excellent play caller, always seems to have a rhyme and a reason for his play calls, always seems to have good game plans in big games, is a guy that has proven that he can get the most out of Alex Smith, Donovan McNabb, Patrick Mahomes. Like, he's gone through a lot of different quarterbacks and made them play at an elite level. So, to me, I think the Chiefs have to be higher, just given Andy Reid, the interior O-line, the receiver. You got Travis Kelce, who I haven't even mentioned, who is like one of the most quarterback comfortable targets in football. Like, every third down, you could just throw Travis Kelce the ball. He will create after the catch, maybe not quite like he used to, but he will. And he's clutch in big games. So to me, like, the Chiefs, the Browns, I'd probably have both those teams ahead of the Falcons and the Bears, but I understand why the Bears are there. The Falcons don't really make sense to me at number 5. I understand that one. I get it, but I also feel like they're just too high. And then you've got the Chiefs defense. Let's not play around with them. Like, they're a really good defense. They were perhaps the best defense by the end of the year in the NFL. So, yeah, Mahomes has a ton of help there right now. There's no question. At number 9, the Cincinnati Bengals. This one's tricky. I definitely think, Higgins and Chase is amazing. But then other than Higgins and Chase, I think the play calling is average. If we're assuming Zach Taylor or whatever, it's going to stay about the same with what they've had. It's average. I think the running back position is below average. The tight end position is below average. The offensive line could be better than it's been in a long time there. Like 2 really good tackles and the 2 Brown Towers. You've got Karras and Kappa inside who are pretty good players. But the O-line isn't amazing. It's certainly not the Eagles, the Lions, or even the Chiefs. But, I mean, maybe it is the Chiefs, but that's debatable, right? It's not the Browns, I would say that. And the defense, I think they're good, but they're not great. So I think a lot of what makes the Bengals good is Joe Burrow, honestly. I think his ability to sequence at the line of scrimmage, read defenses, his accuracy, his precision, and, his big playability is definitely what makes them a really good team. Not saying that's not the case with the Chiefs, but I think the Chiefs do have a little bit more help, perhaps, than even Burrow has, unless you're just putting that much stock into the two receivers, which, yeah, that's great. Like, Jamar Chase is amazing. T. Higgins is amazing. But when you really take a step back, you're kind of like, well, if they didn't have Joe Burrow and they had Gardner Minshew, how good would the team really be? Right? We saw this team miss the playoffs with Jake Browning, and he wasn't bad by any means. He actually was fairly productive, which maybe is a positive. I don't know. It depends what you think of Jake Browning. But yeah, I think number 9 probably is about the range that you would put them in. I think that's fair. But at the same time, I don't know if they would be in the top 10. I haven't really thought of the teams that would be in the top 10 quite yet. I'm going to get there in a second, but first we've got to talk about Tua. Like, to me, thinking of the talent on the Miami Dolphins and the play caller on the Miami Dolphins, there's no question that Miami is a more ideal situation to play in than Cincinnati. I understand the O-line kind of stinks, but at least you have a left tackle, and you've got, like, the fastest freaks you've ever seen. You've got Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and you've got Mike McDaniel creating so many different easy plays for you. Ways to get rid of the ball within 2 seconds. Like, you don't have to really get hit that much. You're getting rid of the ball a lot. You've got a lot of easy throws. The running game is effective. The defense has a lot of talent on it, from the pass rush with Chubb and Phillips and Shaq Barrett with Calais Campbell now, Zach Sealer up front, to Jalen Ramsey and Kendall Fuller and Javon Holland in the back. It's a talented defense. They should make some plays. The offense, though, is super fast, and those fast players and those explosive players make your life easy because you just throw them a 2-yard pass and they create with that pass, and you've got a human glitch named Tyreek Hill at your disposal as well at wide receiver. So to me, like, Miami's got to be higher than the Bengals. I think Miami's got to be higher than the Chiefs. Miami's got to be higher than, depends on where you stand with the Miami defense, depending on your preference between them and the Browns. I think I'd have Miami ahead of Chicago because it's basically Chicago, but like the O-line isn't, like, Chicago's O-line is better on paper, but it's not so much better that I'd rather have Chicago's team, because Mike McDaniel's a big deal. Like, Mike McDaniel's like a top 3 or 4 play caller in the NFL. There's no question about it. He might be the second best play caller in the NFL. So, like, last year, I think, Kyle, Ben Johnson, and Mike McDaniel were the best play callers in football. So for me, like, number 10 is just too low. And there's a reason everyone always talks about Tua having a lot of help, because it is true to a certain degree, right? So you look at the rest of the NFL, and I'm just going to think through each division. The Jets, I would say the Jets would at least enter my mind for this conversation because of their defense. If I was a quarterback, I'd know that I don't have to score that many points every single game. That's first and foremost. I've got a really good left tackle in Tyron Smith. I've got 2 receivers to throw to. I've got Breece Hall as a running back. So I think the Jets are entering that conversation, but I don't know if they would be top 10 because the O-line is still a little questionable. The talent is there, but it's a little bit questionable. The coaching is horrendous, and that's probably why I'd keep them out of the top 10. But they're definitely in the conversation. Now, after that, okay, the Bills are not in the conversation for me. The Patriots are certainly not in the conversation. So you move to the next division. Okay, the Steelers, probably not, just because they don't have a lot of great receivers. The O-line is still very young, but the defense is very good. Mike Tomlin's good. If I was Patrick Mahomes, then maybe, the Steelers would be a great situation just because I've got a defense. I've got 1 receiver or 2 receivers to work with. I've got a good running game. Like, I can work with that, but it's not my ideal quarterback situation if I want to put up some numbies, right? So then we've got the Ravens, which the Ravens are interesting because their O-line is a bit different this year, and we don't know how good it's really going to be. We also got guys that constantly get injured, like Ronnie Stanley. We do have a beast in the backfield in Derrick Henry. We do have an up-and-coming wide receiver one in Zay Flowers. We do have Mark Andrews, who's a stud. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of what makes that thing rhyme and reason and work is Lamar. Like, at the end of the day, I think Lamar makes that thing cook, and Allen makes the Bills cook. Like, those are the two quarterbacks that their offenses are not on this list, where it's because those guys make their offenses click. So I would say that the Ravens are definitely ahead of the Bills, but I would say that the Ravens would be in the top 15 for me for sure. So the AFC North, we've got two of the teams in there. The AFC South, we've got the Texans. Tennessee is kind of interesting because they've got Callahan calling plays now. The O-line actually isn't bad. If you look at it on paper, Peter Skoronski, J.C. Latham on the left, Cushenberry at center. They do have a terrible right tackle. I like their running back position. I think they've got an athletic, young, good tight end. Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins, Tyler Boyd is a pretty good receiver duo. Or trio, I should say. And the defense is not great. So if you're including defenses, maybe not Tennessee, but I think they're sneaky in that conversation. The Colts got an excellent O-line. Michael Pittman's a good receiver, but not a great receiver. Quinyon Mitchell... not Quinyon Mitchell. Why am I saying Quinyon Mitchell? Because Adonai Mitchell is the receiver. Quinyon is the corner. Mitchell, we don't really know how good he is. Josh Downs, he's decent. Tight end is non-existent. Jonathan Taylor is excellent. Shane Steichen's an excellent play caller. So the Colts are probably in the top 20 at the very least, but at the end of the day, I don't think they reach this level. Then you've got Jacksonville, which, honestly, no, just the O-line is not good enough, in my opinion, to really put them in this conversation. But I do like Evan Ingram, Christian Kirk, Brian Thomas Jr., and Travis Etienne. Skill positions are really nice. Doug Peterson's a good play caller, too. But the O-line, they're right outside this conversation. Then you go to the Raiders. The Raiders are pretty interesting because the defense is solid. If they had a really good quarterback, I think people would look at their situation differently because they've got Colton Miller at left tackle. They've got... Now, Jackson Powers Johnson, is it? They drafted in the middle. The O-line is very solid. I think the pass protection could be a little bit better, but their run game is pretty good. Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, Brock Bowers, that's pretty fun. So to me, the Raiders are kind of sneaky, but yeah, I could understand why they're not there. Definitely not the Broncos, not even going to discuss it. Definitely not the Chargers. They don't have any receivers. The Dallas Cowboys, they do have CeeDee Lamb. They do have Ferguson. They do have Brandon Cooks. Tolbert as a number 3. The O-line is probably the reason why they're not here because, at the end of the day, you've got a rookie left tackle. The right tackle position isn't great. Center is new. Left guard is great in Tyler Smith. Right guard is great in Zach Martin, but the play calling isn't fantastic either. So, yeah, Dak's not in his best situation of his career. Maybe he used to be on this list, this supporting cast for the Dallas Cowboys. Eagles are on there. Washington, no. Giants, no. NFC North, you've got to talk about the Packers. Could the Packers be on this list, right? The O-line's always good. The protection is always good. They added a first-round pick at the guard position, I believe left guard with Morgan, if I'm not mistaken. Elton Jenkins is one of the best O-linemen in football. Both of their tackles are pretty good, especially Zach Tom. And Matt LaFleur is a top 10 play caller in the sport, so you have to factor that in. Josh Jacobs is a former all-season type of running back, like leading rusher type of running back 2 years ago. So you got him. Then you've got 2 different tight ends. Musgrave's really athletic. The receiving core is super young and still kind of like developing, but at the same time, this could be their year to have multiple breakouts. Like Reed could break out. Watson's a great deep threat. Reed could work the slot. Wicks is a cool route runner. Chris route runner. Dobbs can go down the field and make some contested catches. So they've got a lot of diversity to the receiver room, and they've got an excellent O-line and a great play caller and a good run game, and the defense is really talented. And even if you include things like home field and stuff like that, now I would say the Packers probably just for like established understanding of how good all these players are. I can understand why they're not top 10, but they're darn close. So far, there's not a team that stands out that did not make the top 10 that I think definitely should be there. Like the Packers, I think's the closest so far. Then you get to the Vikings. Okay, the Vikings are interesting. The Vikings should be on the list. Would Joe Burrow rather have the Vikings O-line, play caller, receiving core? The Vikings got to be on the list. Like, the Vikings are definitely on the list. I'd rather have the Vikings when you consider Kevin O'Connell, when you consider the two tackles, O'Neal and Darisaw, two great players. The guards are solid. The center is okay. Aaron Jones is a great running back, still, in my opinion. TJ Hawkinson's a top 5 or 6 tight end. Justin Jefferson's arguably the best receiver in football. Jordan Addison is a really good number 2. So I would say the Vikings, I would rather be, if I was Joe Burrow, I'd rather play with Justin Jefferson's team than Jamar Chase's team right now. So, like, the Vikings defense last year, too, was sneaky good. They've got great coaching on that side. They added a couple players to that defense. So, I would say the Vikings, especially offensively, like Patrick Mahomes with Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson and Jordan Addison and that O-line with, the main difference is really Andy Reid at the end of the day. I would say the Vikings for sure should be on the list. After that, who else? The NFC West, you've got the Rams. The Rams are interesting. I don't love the tight end. I don't love the wide receiver 3, although Demarcus Robinson played well. But the thing about the Rams is Stafford elevates a lot of people. So, like, Nakua is really good, but he doesn't have the lineage of, like, let's say Justin Jefferson. We know Justin Jefferson's great no matter what. Like, Nakua, okay, how much is, like, Stafford? You know what I mean? Cooper Kupp is slowing down. Tyler Higbee is not any good anymore. The O-line is okay. Williams is really good. But, again, like, McVay is a huge portion of that. Like, would you rather play with McVay, or would you rather play with Shane Waldron and the receivers of Chicago? Would you rather play with McVay and their offense, or the Falcons with what they've got going on? Zach Robinson. Like, Rams, I guess, are in that top 15, but to me, I think the O-line, especially the left tackle, but the interior is really good. I will say that. The receivers are good, but I would say that there's better, for sure. The defense is definitely not great. So if you include the defense, I would definitely say that's not great. It's not ideal. And then you talk about the Seahawks, who basically I'd say yes, but the O-line stinks. So if they had an O-line, I'd say the Seahawks would be on the list. Kind of similar to Miami, I guess. And then the Cardinals, no. So, yeah, I would say the Vikings for sure should be on the list. The Packers are debatable. And there's a couple others like the Rams that are kind of like flirting. The Ravens flirting with that conversation, but not quite there in my opinion. So I think this is a pretty good list overall. I would just maybe swap a few things out of it. But if you guys want me to rank all 32 situations in the NFL, let me know in the comment section below. It's Mitch. I would love to hear about, like, from Sam, like, was defense involved? Was it not? Like, how much did he put into certain things? Like, receivers over O-line over receivers, play callers over everything. Like, what did he do? So that's an interesting thing to gauge. And everyone has a different opinion. Let me know yours in the comment section below. It's Mitch. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next video. Peace.